In the shadow of the thick trees, in the middle of a forest where every breath was soaked with history, sat a samurai. His face was hidden behind a mask, and in his eyes you could see only the shadows of the life that was gone. He was the one who was once called a master of the sword, and now he was just a shadow. I lost my heart when my honor died. For the heart is not just an organ that pumps blood. It is the essence of man himself. When you lose it, you remain alive, but you are no longer a man. The samurai looked carefully at the ground. In his hand was an ancient katana. The rust on the blade seemed to be evidence of his long journey. He began to tell his story, which he had hidden from everyone for so long. When I was young, the heart was something unchanging for me. It beat in my chest, as always, obeying the laws of life. But over the years, when I embarked on the path of war, it became something else. I was merciless to my enemies, but worst of all, to myself. I taught myself how to kill, and in doing so, I lost myself. The heart was moving away, not as a part of the body, but as a symbol of the living. I did not hear its beat, did not feel its pulse. The moment I made the final, decisive blow, the heart disappeared. The samurai fell silent. His fingers tightened on the hilt of his sword. He took a deep breath and continued. At that moment, I realized that the heart was gone. It did not leave physically, no. It slipped away from within me, like a shadow in the night. I stood among the dead bodies and felt no pain, only emptiness. It was the first murder I committed without regret. The samurai closed his eyes so as not to see this world. He knew that life without a heart is an existence where each morning is just a time between nights, and each action is just a continuation of something that has no end. In some cultures, they say that the heart is the place where feelings are concentrated. But I knew that the true heart is not just a feeling. It is the reason for all decisions, all struggle and suffering. My heart was gone, and I found myself in an emptiness where there is no pain, no love, no fear. There is no meaning, no life left in it. The samurai stood up, his body tired, but his movements still retained the grace of a master. He walked a few steps through the forest, stopped at a small stream, and sat down on a stone. I had lived so long that I did not know the last time my heart beat in the rhythm of life. I did not remember the moment when it left. Perhaps it was the first time I killed, perhaps when I learned my first lesson in cruelty, or perhaps when I decided that I would no longer fear death. But whatever it was, I became empty. The samurai drew his sword and wiped its hilt. The sound of his actions filled the air, as if life itself was trying to return, but could not. And here I stand before you, telling you my story. I am searching for something I cannot find. But in this search, I understand one thing. You cannot return what is lost. The heart cannot be restored. It is either there or it is not. And if it is not there, then only emptiness remains. He fell silent, lost in thought. Death is not the end. Death is a transition. And if we do not learn to appreciate every moment, then even death will not free us from emptiness. It will not bring what we so desire. The importance of life is to understand that every moment is a chance to change something, a chance to love, to be loved, to feel pain and joy, even if this feeling is temporary. Because it is temporariness that makes everything valuable. The samurai lowered his head, and there was such weariness in his eyes that it seemed as if the whole world had shrunk in that moment. When I lost my heart, I thought I had lost everything. But now, after all these years, I realized that the moment of loss gave me more than my entire life had ever given me. Loss taught me to value what cannot be lost, what is within us, in the very spirit of life. We must learn to cherish it before it is gone forever. He looked up at the sun, just beginning to set over the horizon. The sand under his fingernails, the wind in his hair, it all felt real. There were no guarantees, but the samurai felt that he was on the way to something important. As the three men approached, the samurai saw that they were not enemies. They were travelers, exhausted and worn out, two of whom were wounded. They stopped in front of him and watched silently, as if they knew that before them stood someone who had already been through something far more terrible than any battle. One of the travelers, a young man with long hair, approached and lowered his head. "We were looking for shelter," he said, his voice shaking. "Please help." The samurai looked at him, but said nothing. His heart was not beating at its usual rhythm, but there was something more than just emptiness in his eyes. He stood before them, but he was no longer just a man with a sword. He was something else, a man who understood the importance of being alive. This is life, he thought. Those who live with their hearts will always find a way to help others. The samurai lowered his sword and motioned for the travelers to follow him. He led them to his refuge, a quiet and secluded place where they could rest and heal their wounds. The same young man who had first approached the samurai sat by the fire and looked into his eyes, as if trying to understand who he was and what kind of person was hiding behind those looks. "Why didn't you kill us?" he asked unexpectedly. The samurai looked at him, and his answer was quiet but confident. "Because I can't kill anymore. I lost my heart, but maybe now it's back. Not in the same way as before, but in the sense that I can feel again. I realize that life is not about victories, not about battles, but about giving someone else a chance. Life is not an end goal. It's a process. And if you don't help others, then you're not truly living." The travelers were silent. They were overwhelmed with gratitude, but they couldn't find the words. They felt that this man in front of them was not an ordinary samurai. He was something more. He was someone who had gone through emptiness and returned. One night, when the fog had fallen on the forest and the fire was almost out, the samurai went outside. He stood under the stars, feeling their light, and thought again about what he had lost and what he had gained. "I have lost my heart, but this is not the end. The life I lead now is different from the one I had before. I do not live for victories, but for the sake of appreciating moments. I do not seek death, but rather seek meanings that enliven my world. I am no longer empty, because I know that in life, what is important is not what you lose, but what you can get back." He felt something change in his soul. The sky was dark, but his heart, once gone, now beat softly in his chest, reminding him that every moment mattered. He was alive, and perhaps this was the greatest victory he could have, a victory over his own shadow, over the emptiness that had swallowed him and now finally retreated. The samurai looked back at his small hut where the travelers slept and felt peace. He no longer sought a path to immortality or infinite power. His path was now in life, in helping those who were lost, in reminding them of the value of their existence. He took his last step into this forest, and perhaps it was his first step on a truly living path. For life without a heart is not death. It is a chance to find yourself again. The samurai stood under the starry sky that night and thought. There was silence in his soul, and he realized more than ever that life without a heart was meaningless. He had lost not only his organ, but his essence, and now, after so many years, he was trying to find his way back. What is life without a heart? He thought. The meaning would not be the fight itself, but what we fight for. The heart is the source of meaning. Without it, life is empty. He left his hut, heading into the forest. Walking in the silence of the night helped him understand his feelings. He began to understand that there was no need to look for what was lost, but to learn to move forward. And then he heard water. A small waterfall reminded him how important it is not to linger in the past. Water flows without stopping. It does not try to return to the past. It always moves forward. So he had to continue on his way. The next morning, the samurai felt a change inside himself. He was ready to give what he himself lacked so much: help, guidance, support. He learned that life is not about searching for what was lost, but about finding meaning again. A few days later, the samurai met a group of people walking along the road. They were looking for shelter. The samurai offered them help, but warned that it required a willingness to accept not only shelter, but also internal changes. "We are fleeing from a war. We have lost everything," said one of the travelers. The samurai realized that their condition was not only physical. They had lost their meaning, just as he had once. He offered them shelter, knowing that their salvation lay in restoring their inner peace. The samurai did not teach them martial arts. He taught them how to live. He spoke of the importance of inner harmony and accepting that you cannot always control life. They all began to appreciate each day and find meaning in simple things. One day, one of the travelers said, "Now I understand. You didn't just teach us how to survive. You taught us how to live. We stopped fearing death and began to value life." The samurai realized that his heart had returned, not through regaining what was lost, but through helping and understanding others. He had been a guide, but now he knew that this was his path. When the samurai returned to the place where he had once left his sword, He knew that his path was complete. He no longer sought meaning in the past, but found it through present moments and helping others. He was ready to move forward without looking back,